American foreign policy makers need to recognize a fundamental flaw that the U.S. has made since the beginning of the Cold War. We cannot force democracy on other nations. America has been pushing democracy on other nations, believing that it is the best system of government available, which it may be. Right now we are occupying two nations abroad while we help them set up a system of democracy to replace their oppressive totalitarian systems of government. What we must recognize is that our action is misinformed. We are not taking into consideration the cultural differences in Iraq and Afghanistan. Among the groups that influence contemporary foreign policy makers is the Project for the New American Century, created in 1997, whose founding members include Jeb Bush, former governor of Florida and brother of President George W. Bush, Paul Wolfowitz, former World Bank president and U.S. Deputy Secretary of Defense, Donald Rumsfeld, former Secretary of Defense, and Dick Cheney, Vice President of the United States. This group believes our imperial-minded control of the world is justified. One of their maxims is to accept responsibility for America's unique role in preserving and extending an international order friendly to our security, our prosperity, and our principles. The Project for the New American Century is a non-profit educational organization dedicated to a few fundamental propositions: that American leadership is good both for America and for the world, and that such leadership requires military strength, diplomatic energy, and commitment to moral principle. In The Need for Recovery of Philosophy, John Dewey writes, "In a complicated and perverse world, action which is not informed with vision, imagination, and reflection is more likely to increase confusion and conflict than to straighten things out." I agree with Dewey, and I strongly disagree with the ethnocentric leaders involved in the Project for a New American Century. This tunnel-visioned approach doesn't take into account the reflections necessary to foresee the potential problems that arise in forcefully controlling others. Cornell West describes the effects of imperial aims on the Middle East. Modern clerical Islam was a response to imperial European authorities that degraded Islamic religion, plundered Islamic resources, and cast the Islamic way of being and living as inferior to that of the modern West. Without recognizing the effects of forced conformity to imperial aims, America fans the flames of resentment in the region. The imperialist attitude that America's might determines what is right for others is fallible. As America embarks on an imperial-monitored democratization in Iraq, its heavy hand is felt among those who are glad that the dictatorial Hussein is gone, but suspicious of U.S. strategies and goals. The prospective feature of pragmatism must be applied to foreign policy. What will the consequences of our actions be? John Dewey addresses flux in The Lost Individual. Individuals will refine themselves only as their ideas and ideals are brought into harmony with the realities of the age in which they act. He was speaking of the differences before and after the turn of the industrial age, but I believe that his thought has great merit when we apply it to culture in today's context. Individuals' ideals must be in harmony with the culture in which they have been raised. The American culture and the Middle Eastern culture are not the same. Cornell West has some profound insights on this matter. Democracy is more a verb than a noun. It is more a dynamic striving and collective movement than a static order or stationary status quo. Democracy is not just a system of governance, as we tend to think of it, but a cultural way of being. All systems set up to enact democracy are subject to corrupt manipulations, and that is why the public commitment to democratic involvement is so vital. Genuine, robust democracy must be brought into life through democratic individuality, democratic community, and democratic society. Middle Eastern countries will have to examine the modern West and Islamic traditions in order to forge a new democratic vision in the Muslim world. Dewey wrote, "Acknowledgement and thought brings with it intelligent discrimination and choice. It is the first step in forming those objects of significant allegiance out of which stable and efficacious individuality may grow." The ameliorative feature of pragmatism promotes the idea that human beings have the power to make things better. That feature reduces the dualism between optimists and pessimists and focuses on action that produces the most good for the most people, which is in our best interest. Charles Sanders Peirce says belief is a rule for action. Belief that our government is misguided in its imperial conquest gives us a call for action to take back our country we love. We must take action to rekindle the democratic ideals of life, liberty, and the pursuit of happiness, of equality for all people, and opposition to tyranny that founded our great country. Those who have spoken out against the Bush administration have been branded unpatriotic and condemned as undermining the American way. According to John Sturr, William James holds that the willingness to risk belief in possibilities that are often scoffed or mocked by common sense generates an energy that frequently leads to paths of insight otherwise closed off from us. How do we know what to do unless we try? James wrote a famous letter to the nation, the teaching of philosophy in our colleges. One can never deny that philosophic study means the habit of always seeking an alternative, not taking the usual for granted, of making conventionalities fluid again, of imagining foreign states of mind. Dewey encourages us that we have the right to believe at our own risk any hypothesis that is live enough to tempt our will. We do have the right. We have the right to question our part in the world theater, and that right is essentially what democracy stands for. The Socratic commitment to questioning requires a relentless self-examination and critique of institutions of authority, motivated by an endless quest for intellectual integrity and moral consistency. If these power-drunk leaders of ours are allowed to pursue their agenda of world domination unchecked, we should be ashamed of ourselves for not taking the action needed at the present time. Without Socratic questioning by the demos, elite greed at home and imperial domination abroad devour any democracy. I agree with the wise and motivating proclamation Cornell West makes in Democracy Matters. Democracy is always a movement of energized public to make elites responsible. It is at its core and most basic function the taking back of one's powers in the face of misuse of elite power. These pragmatic thinkers shine light on our current situation. Their thinking is inspirational and moving as they call us to act for what is right and outline our ability to change the world for the better. Pragmatism encourages a community of thinkers. The emphasis on the social aspect of philosophy and how we can take many viewpoints to advise our perspective is of much greater benefit than the alternative, that is, taking America's foreign policy as absolute. The purpose of this paper is not to knock America, this land that I love. There are many other citizens of these United States who feel as I do about our current foreign policy. Many of us feel that our voices aren't being heard, but we are becoming more and more numerous as more scholars speak out on this subject. It is only when we take a pragmatic stance on foreign policy, when we realize that there is an alternative to the militarism that has unified our society for decades, that we cannot force our way of democracy on other nations, and when we believe together and take action to restore our democratic ideals, that we can be a force for peace and a true role model to other nations of the world.